Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for episode 3 of The Last of Us, Long Time, or A Long Time. It's one of those two things. Either way, really fun episode, probably my favorite so far. I really liked the last one for sure with the clickers. I think this was more of an emotional episode, despite what happened at the end of the last one. This was definitely like the emotional impact episode. With this review, of course, because this being based on the game that I have played, I will be doing all of my reviews. This is just for anyone who's new. All of my reviews are going to be like my movie review. So non-spoilers in the first part. I'll be spoiling stuff for the actual episode. So if you haven't seen the episode at all, don't watch this. But as far as spoilers from the game, because there's a ton of stuff that happens in this that doesn't happen in the game and vice versa. So as far as like connections and things like that, what I think, wasn't here that might be pushed, further out, things like that. I don't want to spoil that for anyone who hasn't played the game. So that will be spoilers and, potential spoilers, I guess, as far as the story is concerned for the game / the entire series. So when I get to that point, I will let you guys know. But for now, non-spoilers is, connection wise to the game. Fantastic episode. Bill and Frank were really well done. I think they did a great job. Simply put, you don't see Frank in the game. That's like the one thing I can tell you. That's like the biggest difference. We do not actually see Frank. We only get to meet Bill. So that was really interesting. That was definitely a huge change, and especially the fact that they spent the whole episode on them. Like we actually see Joel and Tess. We actually see Tess come back because they're doing a flashback. So we actually get to see them interact with them. And I thought that was a really cool moment. And we jumped through, years at a time. I thought they did a fantastic job with that, because it was like, okay, we see him. He's obviously like a survival prepper. He has a super secret basement under his basement, and he's got cameras and stuff. He's got like walls of guns and things like that. And it's just like, man, this is really cool. It's a cool way to start it out. He's by himself. The town heads out. We find out, of course, through the way they did the flashback this time, instead of it being a cold open, it was actually set in the middle of the episode, because technically most of the episode is a flashback until we get to the very end. So like the very beginning and very end are the only parts that are actually modern. So we hit the flashback after we zoom in on the bodies, and then it cuts back and it's like, yeah, these are, this woman and her child were just shot and killed. And it's like, oh, dead people can't spread the virus. And so that's what they did. So it starts off there, and then of course it's Bill just kind of building things up. He's by himself. He makes fences, he makes traps, electrified fences at that. He has flamethrowers. He's got little traps where it shoots, shotguns shells at you, or well, I mean, it doesn't shoot the actual shell, but obviously, the slug blows out and it kills you. And I was like, this is cool. This is a cool way that they're handling it, and it's him just kind of going through and seeing how he built up, the entire town. And that definitely for sure is a huge connection to the game. No spoilers, but that's a huge connection. So I was like, that's really cool. You get to see him actually build up what you can experience in the game, where it's like, okay, this stuff is done here and this craziness is happening there, and it's all done by like one man. So that was really cool, the way they handled that, where you actually see him build that up, and he's just going through, he's cooking his food, he's fine. Everything is just, I'm good, I'm by myself, and I am okay. And then the alarm goes off. He sees like, oh, there's a hole in the ground, let me go kill this thing. He hears a voice, and that's where he falls in love. He meets Frank. I almost said the wrong name, but he meets Frank, and then the two of them they fall in love. They talk, they have their food, and then they bond over the piano, they make out, they bang. I was like, man, Frank is assertive. He's like, let's do it. So they do it, and they fall in love, and then they did something really interesting where they do the time skip, and then they have their argument, and it makes it seem like all right, they're having their issues, but ultimately they end up working it out in that sequence. And it was really cool. I was like, okay, the way they're handling this, and especially once they got to that point, it was like, okay, let's see how this plays out. Because once they did that and he didn't leave, it was like, oh, that's where like the giant diversion from the game comes from, because you don't see Frank, but they do have an argument, and they split off. That's why you only get to meet Bill. So I like the way that was handled, and you just see them as they go through, and it's really simple. It's just these two characters, and the further along it went, I was like, okay, they would show like the time frame, because obviously they were older characters like when it started, and so they show the time frame, and as it goes on and on, it's like, oh, like for a minute I didn't realize it, because they would do the time skip, but then I'd kind of forget exactly where we are in time. And it was like once it got to 2023, it was like, oh crap, they're they're older than Joel is. They're significantly older than he is. And it was like, oh, that's really interesting, the way that's handled. Because as I was watching it, I would, like I said, I would kind of keep forgetting as it would show us the time. It was kind of like you'd spend a lot of time within whatever year they were in. And so I would kind of forget. And then like as time went on, I was like, oh, hold on a second. And then obviously at the very end, for sure, they're full on gray, and like Frank's in a wheelchair and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is really different. This is really interesting too, because once it got to that point at the end, before they even ended up killing themselves together, I was like, I don't think we're actually going to see Joel and Ellie show up here. I don't think they're actually going to even encounter them, and they don't. We go through most of this episode, and it's just these two guys together in this town. We see there's very minute interaction with allies. We see a small interaction with enemies. And then it's just them. It's just them kind of living out their lives. And then, eventually it gets to the end, and it's like one man is dying, and he's like, this is my last day. I'm ready to be done. And his, husband, by the end of the episode is just like, me too. Like, if I don't have you, like, what point is it? Like, you are my purpose. And it was like super emotional. It was just multiple times throughout the episode. It's like, this is some emotional stuff. This is like, it's sad. And it's just like, I kind of expected it. Once we got to a certain point, I was kind of expecting things, like I said, when they did another time skip and they were older, and I was like, I don't think we're going to see them interact, present day with our characters. And then, once they were gray, and like I said, one's in a wheelchair, I was like, yeah, it's not happening. They're just gone. And so that's actually what ends up happening. They ultimately, died together, and they did something really cool, which technically this is a connection, but when they end the episode and they show like the stuff through the window, that's a reference. I would assume it's meant to be an exact reference to the ending of the second game, where like they show a shot like that. And I thought that was pretty cool, because I thought for sure they were gonna pan out and like actually show them, but they don't do that. It's like, it's just in a the bittersweet way that it's done, the very romantic ending, where you don't have to see what they look like it's bad. They've been there, like, especially when you see like how much dust there is, there's bugs on the food and stuff like that. That it's been a decent little chunk of time. So they don't show it, which I thought was a great choice, but I thought for sure that's what they were doing. I thought they were going to zoom like all the way out and actually show them in the bed, but they don't. And I was like, that's a cool way to end it. Plus a reference. I have to imagine it was an intentional reference, but love the episode. I thought it was a really good episode. I thought everything they did with them was incredibly well done. It was a huge difference that, in all honesty, I don't think could really work in the game. Like, that's, obviously one of the benefits of the show. Like, I think I mentioned this in my very first review. With it not being the game, you're not tied down to Joel. You can hop around to any and everybody. Like, you can see, flashbacks and stuff. They didn't do that in the game. Like, there were no flashbacks in the game. It's just, this is what happened in the world. You're playing as Joel. That's it. It's whatever he sees, that's what you see. And that's all there is to it. You live his life. But in this, you get to see other people's lives. You get the flashbacks. You get the start of the virus. You get the theoretical concept in the very first episode of like what could possibly happen. And, obviously that is exactly what happens in the show. And I like the way that was handled. They talk about in this episode, in the very beginning, they show that bond between Joel and Ellie starting to form, where there's questions and answers. And so it's like, this is how it happened. It happened on Friday. By Monday, it was over. It was dead and gone. They referenced the pancake mix, and like he like pauses when he says it. He's like, pancake mix, and he kind of like slows down a little bit. And it was like, that's interesting. And obviously that was the running theory in the first episode, and they proved that to be true, in the opening of the second one, where they talked about exactly where it happened was the flour factory. So I thought that was really cool. And then he explains that to Ellie and gives her, answers that she never had before. So I thought it was really well done. And then of course we get to the end of the episode and they have the note, and I like the way they handled that scene as well, because that was obviously that was them, like, the whole episode, like they make a clear point, especially when they meet each other. Bill and Joel are like the same person. They are the same person. That he even says it in the note. It's like, we aren't friends, but like, I don't like you, but we're kind of friends. And it's like, we are the people that kind of get things done. That's why he even wrote on the note, it was specifically like, Joel. That's why he told him, he was like, hey, call Joel. He didn't say like call Joel and Tess. He was like, call Joel, like he'll take care of you. So he knew, like, it was like, like, I don't really like you. This is just how I am. Like, we're both kind of distant, and we are where we are in the world, and we understand each other. Take what you need. This is just how our story ended, but it's probably gonna be you. So take what you need, because you're the type of person that I am. Take care of the people you can take care of. Save who you can save, if you will. And so of course they get to the point in the letter, it was like, save Tess, and obviously Ellie stops, and he takes the note and he reads the rest of it, and he goes outside, and it was a really good moment. I like the way they handled it, because I was curious. I was like, is he going to be silent? Is he going to actually, are they going to make it where he screams? Like, how are they going to handle this? And he's silent. But that moment was him for sure just being like, I lost Tess. probably same as the note where it was like, I don't really like Bill, probably like Frank, and Frank was nice, but it's like, they were cool. That's about as close as he gets, as far as where things are in the world. It's like, if someone's cool, that's basically like a best friend to him. And it's like, this is all I had. Like, I lost Tess. I tried to find them, like the only other two people I kind of trust. They're both gone. They've been gone for quite a while. And it's just like, he feels kind of alone. Like, all I have now is my brother, and he's kind of missing. So things are like really effed up for him. And it's just like this moment where he just stops and he's just outside their house and he just looks and he's just looking out, and it's just like taking a moment to process. And it's like, okay, I got to get back to it. So I love that moment. It was very simple, and it's just like, this is him processing and figuring out like, what's my next step. And then of course they get in the car. Ellie's never been in a car before, so that was funny, where it was like seatbelt, and she's like, huh? And so I thought that was really cool. And of course, they end it and they take off on the road. I'm very excited for the next one because the preview seemed really cool, and it's probably going to be like the most action-packed episode, potentially. I know that I didn't see the trailer for this one, but I heard that the trailer basically made it seem like it was going to be a real actiony episode. So who knows what'll really happen, but based on the actual moment, I can say the same thing for this episode, because the moment in the in the game, at least, is definitely a lot more action. But I enjoyed the episode for sure. Overall, I thought it was a fantastic episode, very emotional. Looking forward to the rest of it. And I think that's about all I can say as far as non-spoiler stuff. So if you have not played the game, this will be full on spoilers, because there's a lot of stuff that did happen and didn't happen, between these two things. So you can say if you don't mind, but getting right into it, it's a lot less action-packed. For one, there is no Joel. There is no Joel in this scenario where there's a bunch of things going on. They're fighting runners and they're fighting clickers or this and that. They don't even meet the bloater. So that's going to be down the line, because that was a huge moment, which they referenced in the last episode, where it was like, are there big ones that can like throw spore bombs at you? And it's like, I hope not. So in the context of the series, Joel hasn't seen one before, but we also don't see one in this episode. So that'll come down the line. They don't have the moment, that was like a big point in the game where Joel walks up to the fridge or whatever and he gets hung upside down before Bill ends up coming in. So we don't get to see that. I'm sure they can easily throw that in. It's just a trap where he gets hung upside down. They could easily throw that at like any random point where they fight some random people. That could easily happen. So I'm sure we'll see that down the line. The bloater will come down the line. Obviously seeing Bill and Frank in general, seeing both of them was very interesting. So I like the way that was handled. I do like the fact that it was bittersweet. Obviously the way they did it before was Bill was just kind of alone, simply. So I like the way they did it in this, where it was like, it's different, but it was nicer. At least as far as the story, like they have their arguments and stuff, but ultimately it was just a nice love story. So it was actually probably sweeter than anything that showed up in, probably either of the games, admittedly. Like there's not really any like just nice happy love story. Like you kind of get close a little bit, I guess you could say, in the second game, but in the first game it was kind of just like, nah, it's just dark. People that you don't want to die probably don't die, and that's about as close as you get to happy. But in this, it was just like a nice bittersweet love story, and it was enjoyable. So I definitely liked that. I didn't mind at all that it wasn't really action based, because it was just a well-told story. It was really well done. From like beginning to end, like the Joel and Ellie stuff, them obviously getting closer, him answering her questions showed that he's, getting just a little bit closer. I don't know if it was meant to be a reference. I know people do this, like it's been a thing all the time, but in the beginning, when Joel is like stacking the rocks together, that's meant to be like, kind of a little memorial to Tess. Like people do that. Like it's just, you put stones together just to kind of reference someone's life. And all I could think was, I don't know why he's putting that up, because Nathan Drake is just going to come kick it over, because that's what I did in all the games. So I don't know if that was meant to be a reference to Uncharted, but that's all I could think of. I was like, all I think is like someone's just going to kick that down, because that's what happens in Uncharted. Like that's all I could think. So I thought that was funny. I don't know if they did that and they were like, this is also a reference, or if it was always meant to be that and it just happens to be a reference. But either way, that's what I thought. I was like, they're gonna get knocked down. Nate's just gonna knock them down, and that's it. But I love everything that they did throughout the episode. Like I said, I don't mind that it wasn't really action packed or anything like that, because it was well done either way. But I am curious where they're gonna have the upside down thing. I know other people mention that a lot, because it was a moment in the game for sure. For me, I don't mind if they don't do that at all, honestly. I'm sure they will, because it's like, it's a trap. You could do it anywhere. It's simple. The bloater, I'm very curious how that's going to happen, because if it's not in this episode, which obviously it wasn't, there were only 3 people involved there. So either it's going to be more people are involved or at least one less person, and it's just a Joel and Ellie thing. So I'm really curious how they're going to change that around, because obviously a lot of stuff has already been moved. The hotel was moved. The town is completely different. They're in and out, and that's all there is to it. They don't go to the school and do all this other stuff and go through the houses. It's just like a little sect. That's a little sect. Excuse me. Just a little sect that we get to see. Obviously by the end, they're in, they're out, and that's all there is to it. So I am curious where the bloater ultimately is going to end up showing up, but I'm excited for that for sure, because I feel like in the context of the game, it's really easy to make it just be like, all right, here you go. It's you and like the kid. You survive. I think I mentioned this before, where it was like, when you're playing, it's like, of course I'm going to survive. I'm playing the game. I have to survive. That is the story. But when you're watching the show, they can change things around and make it a bit more intense, and they can do it where the bloater might not show up until, excuse me, after he even ends up finding his brother. Like, it might be a minute. Like, we might see Tommy come in, and the 2 of them and Ellie and maybe even more other, multiple other people have to fight this bloater. And so obviously, Tommy will be fine, but like those random people might get hit. They might get bashed in the head or something crazy. They get spores thrown on them, or however they change it. They could still do spores. That would be interesting to see how they would do it. That way, if they kept the spores just specifically for the bloater, but that might be how they do it, and just throw in a bunch of people, because like I said, when you're in the game, you can just strafe around, run in the circle a bunch over and over again, throw some Molotovs, do some dodges, you're good to go. But when it's like, point blank, here we are, you're just watching it, you're not in it. It's like, it has to be forward momentum. You can't really have a bunch of characters kind of strafing around the gym a couple of times, just throwing Molotov cocktails, jumping up on the on the railing, and then jumping down on the railing and back and forth to try to survive. So when it's a show, it has to be done differently, and I feel like they could throw in other people to make the bloater even more intense in live action, because it can actually wipe out a couple of people that they're with, and then of course leave the main characters alive. So I feel like that's what we should expect. Who knows when, of course, but we'll see when that happens. But either way, another fantastic episode. I'm very excited to see the rest. I do wish, it totally makes sense why they wouldn't do it, because get the buzz going, get more people watching, more people buying the game, playing the game, all that good stuff. But it's like, man, I sure wish I could just watch the whole show right now, because I really want to see how they handle it. It's been renewed for season 2, which will be part 2 of the game. They also said that the second game could be more than one season, so it could be seasons 2 and 3 cover The Last of Us Part 2. I'm very curious how that'll ultimately play out. What will they change there? Obviously, the big thing I think will be the same, but I think they'll change when it happens, because I still, to this day, no joke, I will argue this to the end of my life. I honestly believe that if the second game's pacing was done differently, people would not hate the game as much as they did. It's just that thing happened so early, and it was just like, nope, and that was it. I honestly still believe if it was later, change some, make the flashbacks just sections we actually play through, I feel like people would have felt differently. But it was so early and so fast, it just turned a lot of people off. I personally love the second game more than the first game, but I'm like one of the crazy people apparently. But that's just me. We'll see what happens when the show comes out. But so far, I'm loving it. Of course, we'd love to know what you guys thought about this. I'm coughing so much, I don't know why. Not even sick. Maybe I am. Either way, want to know what you guys thought about this episode, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. Of course, with this being such a huge departure from the game, if you've played the game, I would love to know your thoughts. Like, how do you feel about the change, actually seeing both of them together and not being really action-packed, not even seeing Joel actually interact with them outside of that one flashback sequence? I would love to know your thoughts on how it was changed. Do you like the change? Do you hate the change? With all the things, well, I guess the two big things, the upside down thing and the bloater, with those taken out, where do you think they would fit kind of in the story we do have? I think they could do, if they do the upside down thing, I think it would really work well at the college. That could be a great sequence for that to happen, which would be really interesting to see how they handle the college sequence. How short will that be? Because that was a lot of stuff. Yeah, you're going through a college campus. So I'm very curious how that's going to look now. I hadn't thought about that, and the big mirror building. But I think that could easily work there. Obviously, that's also where Joel gets injured, so they could kind of tie that together where he gets strung up, and then somehow that leads to him getting impaled once he's cut free. So they could do it that way. Like I said, I think the Tommy thing is where the bloater might show up. I think that's the perfect way to do it. You could just have a bunch of people who are helping the main characters and all those random people, they're gone. Tragic, but you know, action, and it is what it is. But that's my thoughts on that. Like I said, we'd love to know your thoughts on it, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Because I'm bad at this, I never make this reference, but I do streaming, so definitely check out my streaming channel if you guys are interested. I will actually be doing, well, by the time you guys see this, it'll have already happened yesterday for you. I did Dead Space, so definitely check out my stream for Dead Space. I'll make that like my link thing. But I have streaming. Invisible High is my main channel, or my main streaming channel, I should say. But I'm also on Twitch if you'd rather follow on Twitch. Invisiblekatana there, Invisible High on YouTube. Links all in the description if you guys want to check that out. I'd really appreciate it. But definitely want to know what you guys thought about The Last of Us Episode 3. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.